The legendary Orion General Ymir lay bleeding and broken, shocked that his only hope for survival was the human filth he had long dismissed as weak, and shocked even more that they would risk everything to save him. Aboard his heavily armed freighter, grizzled human mercenary Ryan Russell was cleaning his pulse rifle, an old habit from his days as a special forces operator. The ship drifted through the void of space. Ryan monitored comms chatter, listening for any unusual activity. An emergency distress signal suddenly blared through the speakers, crackling with static. It was coming from an Orion ship under vicious attack by pirates. The Orions were the dominant power in the sector, proud, fierce warriors standing over 7 feet tall, with scaly reptilian skin and faces like demons. Getting involved would be suicide. But then the message mentioned General Ymir, a legendary Orion commander known across the galaxy for his brilliant tactics and ironclad code of honor. Ryan flashed back to memories of fighting alongside Ymir on a joint operation years ago. He had developed a deep respect for the alien general's genius-level strategic mind and strong principles, even if Ymir and his fellow Orions looked down on humans as inferior. Pulling up his ship's scanner, Ryan saw Ymir's vessel floating dead in space, engines destroyed, its hull breached in a dozen places. It had taken a brutal beating. The pirate ship moved in for the kill, eager to claim the huge bounty on Ymir's head and the glory of defeating a legendary warrior. Orion reinforcements would never reach Ymir in time, but maybe against all odds one puny human could. There would be hell to pay for interfering in Orion affairs, but Ryan owed Ymir an old debt of honor. His life belonged to the alien. Now was his chance to repay that debt. Slamming a fist on the console, Ryan made his choice. "Nix, plot an intercept course, maximum burn," he barked at the ship AI. Locking his rifle to the magnetic plates of his combat armor, Ryan sprinted to the bridge, adrenaline surging. He was ready to risk everything. Ryan's freighter dropped out of warp speed, guns blazing. The pirates were caught off guard as Ryan's ship unleashed a relentless barrage of firepower. They hastily returned fire, but their weapons barely dented Ryan's reinforced hull. Ryan targeted the pirate ship's engines and weapon systems with his military-grade cannons. With pinpoint accuracy, he disabled them in a fierce onslaught, leaving the pirate ship dead in space. Maneuvering his ship protectively in front of Ymir's crippled vessel, Ryan hailed the general on a private frequency. Ymir's bloodied face appeared on screen, his green scales glistening with dark blood from a gash on his temple. The proud Orion warrior looked utterly shocked to see a human coming to his rescue. "General Ymir, this is Ryan Russell. We fought together on Zeta Prime a few years back. I'm here to pull your ship to safety with my tractor beam," Ryan said quickly, not wasting any time on pleasantries. Ymir's face contorted, his pride warring with the dire reality of his situation. Another explosion rocked his failing ship, sparks flying on his end of the video feed. "I do not need help from a human," Ymir spat, his words laced with pain. "With all due respect, sir, your ship is falling apart. You won't survive much longer out here. Let me tow you out of this mess," Ryan insisted. Ymir glared at Ryan for a long moment, before finally giving a curt nod. "Very well," he growled. Ryan expertly locked on the tractor beam, the invisible energy field enveloping Ymir's much larger Orion craft. He began towing the damaged vessel away from the pirate ship, still sparking impotently in space. But their escape was short-lived. Suddenly, 3 more pirate vessels appeared on the scanner, heading straight toward them with weapons charged. Ryan realized with sinking dread that they must have been cloaked, waiting in ambush for anyone trying to rescue Ymir. There was no way to outrun them while towing the crippled Orion ship. Gritting his teeth, Ryan diverted power to his forward deflector shields. He swung his ship around and barreled ahead on a direct collision course with the incoming pirates, playing a deadly game of chicken with tons of metal hurtling through space. The pirates scattered at the last possible second to avoid crashing, buying Ryan a small window to put some distance between them. Ryan knew he had only delayed the inevitable. The pirates were still in hot pursuit and would be on them again in moments. He had to do something drastic. Fingers flying over the console, he opened a channel to Ymir's ship. General, I need you to brace for warp speed. It's our only chance to shake them, Ryan warned. Jump to warp now? In my ship's condition, you'll tear us apart, Ymir argued, his voice strained. Another hit rocked his crippled vessel as the pirates opened fire again. If we stay here, we're both dead anyway. Do you trust me? Ryan asked intensely, making eye contact through the video link. There was a tense beat. Then Ymir gave a solemn nod, putting his life in Ryan's hands. Proximity alarms blared as the pirates closed in, their barrage of firepower hammering Ryan's weakening shields. With a determined shout, Ryan punched the warp drive. The stars stretched into infinite lines of light, and they hurtled into the unknown, not knowing if Ymir's ship would even hold together. Ryan and Ymir burst out of warp speed into a deserted star system many light-years away from where the pirates had ambushed them. Ryan scanned the area with his ship's sensors, breathing a sigh of relief when he saw no signs of pursuit on the screen. He steered the two ships, still connected by the tractor beam, into orbit around a desolate moon. It had a thin but breathable atmosphere, perfect for making repairs. After landing on the barren surface, Ryan grabbed his helmet and a toolkit. He cycled through the airlock and spacewalked across the void to Ymir's battered ship, mag boots clanking on the hull. Finding the damaged entry hatch, he pried it open with a grunt and clambered inside. The interior was dark, lit only by sparking wires and flickering emergency lights. Ryan found Ymir slumped against a bulkhead, his green scales slick with dark blood seeping from multiple wounds. The general's eyes cracked open as Ryan knelt beside him, holding out his canteen. "Here, drink," Ryan said. Ymir grabbed the water and gulped it down, then fixed Ryan with a piercing stare. "Why would a human risk his life for an Orion?" Ymir asked, his deep voice strained. Ryan shrugged as he opened a medkit and began treating Ymir's injuries. "I always repay my debts," he said simply. As Ryan worked, Ymir recounted the details of the pirate ambush. Their attackers had cloaking tech and weapons far beyond any outlaw gang. "I suspect traitors in Orion Command are aiding the pirates," Ymir growled. Ryan nodded grimly. Agreed. Something doesn't add up. He jury-rigged a repair to the comm system and tried to hail Orion High Command to report their location, but the signal wouldn't go through, like it was being jammed. A sense of unease prickled through Ryan. He doubled his efforts to restore basic flight systems, fingers flying over the controls. "We need to get moving ASAP," he said tersely. Just as Ryan finished welding the last hull breach, Ymir shouted a warning. A massive war fleet had just dropped out of warp, heading straight for them with the pirate ships at the vanguard. Cursing, Ryan sprinted back to his own ship. He raised the shields and prepped evasive maneuvers, watching the fleet grow larger on his viewscreen. A voice boomed over the comm, cold and imperious, demanding their surrender. Ymir went rigid, his face twisting in shock and rage. "Corvus," he spat, "my treacherous second-in-command." Corvus's voice dripped with smug triumph. "Once you're dead, I will rule the Orion Empire, and these pirates will be hailed as heroes for killing that meddling human." Ryan snarled in defiance, hands flying over the weapon controls. He targeted the lead ship and opened fire, his military-grade cannons spitting streams of superheated plasma at the attacking fleet. Ryan's pulse rifle spat red bolts of energy at the looming Orion warship, the shots glancing harmlessly off its reinforced armor plating. The human grimaced as he checked his readouts, not even a scratch on the enemy shields. They were hopelessly outgunned. Ymir's clawed fingers danced across the flickering control panel, desperately hailing Corvus on all frequencies. "Corvus, what is the meaning of this treachery?" the general roared, green eyes flashing with rage and disbelief. Corvus's scaled visage appeared on the cracked viewscreen, his features twisted in a sneer of contempt. "I am the mastermind behind these pirate attacks, you old fool. I have been using them to destabilize the Empire, to create a power vacuum that I will fill. With you out of the way, nothing can stop me from seizing the throne." Ryan's jaw clenched as he listened to Corvus's monologue, his mind racing. They had no chance of defeating this war fleet with their meager armaments, but maybe there was another way. The human's fingers flew over the console as he pulled up geological scans of the barren moon below, searching for any weaknesses to exploit. There, his screen lit up with pockets of seismic instability pockmarking the surface, volatile fault lines and magma chambers lurking just beneath the crust. The missiles streaked through the void and slammed into the moon's surface in blossoms of fire. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then the ground buckled and heaved as massive groundquakes ripped across the planetoid, its rocky skin splitting open like an overripe fruit. Enormous geysers of molten rock exploded from the fissures, painting the starry sky in hues of angry red and searing orange. The plumes of superheated magma and volcanic gases shot miles into the air, creating a hellish inferno in the cold vacuum of space. "Hold on!" Ryan shouted as he punched the retro rockets and sent his ship hurtling directly into the heart of the cataclysm he had unleashed. The freighter shuddered and groaned, its hull temperature spiking dangerously as it plunged into the billowing clouds of smoke and ash. But the gambit worked. The intense heat bloom masked Ryan's ship from enemy sensors, and the electromagnetic disturbance from the seismic upheaval jammed their targeting systems. Corvus's fleet opened fire blindly into the maelstrom, lances of searing light crisscrossing the roiling plumes of magma. Ryan gritted his teeth and wrenched the control yoke, sending his ship into a dizzying spiral. He jinked and wove between the deadly energy blasts and blazing chunks of molten rock, his knuckles white on the controls. Alarms blared as the hull temperature climbed into the red, the metal groaning under the thermal stresses. Ymir's crippled warship fared worse in the inferno, its damaged engines unable to match Ryan's nimble maneuvering. The behemoth shuddered as stray shots slammed into its hull, carving molten gashes across its armored bulk. The tractor beam linking it to Ryan's freighter flickered and died as the emitter arrays overloaded. "Damn it, I'm losing him!" Ryan snarled. Yanking the stick into a hairpin turn, he circled back and dove beneath Ymir's listing vessel. With a bone-rattling clang, he extended the emergency docking clamps and latched them onto the Orion hull plates, the magnetic locks struggling to find purchase on the heat-warped armor. Diverting power from the weapons, Ryan poured everything he had into the straining engines. The human ship shuddered and clawed for altitude, slowly dragging Ymir's crippled craft with it. Rivulets of sweat poured down Ryan's face as he wrestled with the juddering control yoke, fighting to keep the linked ships from being dashed against the canyon walls, looming out of the smoke. With a burst of braking thrusters, Ryan managed to guide the conjoined vessels into a deep ravine, its obsidian cliffs providing some meager cover from the orbital bombardment. He shut down all non-essential systems to minimize their energy signature, praying the interference from the seismic upheaval would keep them hidden. On the flagship's bridge, Corvus pounded a clenched fist against the arm of the command chair, his eyes blazing with rage as he watched his quarry disappear into the volcanic storm. But the Warfleet's sensors were still scrambled by the electromagnetic chaos of the groundquakes, and the plummeting meteors of molten slag forced the ships to pull back to a higher orbit, lest they be pummeled by the flaming debris. In the temporary respite, Ryan slumped back in his pilot's chair, his shirt drenched with sweat. He keyed the comm with a trembling hand, hailing Ymir on their private channel. "General, we need to find proof of that scaly bastard's treachery," he said urgently. "It's the only way to stop him from taking over once he kills us." Ymir's reptilian features were etched with pain and exhaustion, but a fierce light still burned in his eyes. The general studied the tactical display for a long moment, then stabbed a clawed finger at a particular mountain range. "There," he rumbled, "an obsidian peak with a hidden bunker known only to me. Land at the base and I will guide us inside. With luck, the facility will contain the evidence we need to expose Corvus's schemes." Ryan nodded grimly and fired the thrusters, sending the linked ships hurtling through the smoke and fire towards the distant mountains. As they flew, a plan began to take shape in his mind, a desperate plan, but the only one that might just save both their lives and the fate of the Orion Empire itself. Ryan's battered freighter touched down with a jolt on the barren mountainside, loose moon rocks clattering against the hull. He quickly shut down the engines and hurried to the back of the ship, slinging Ymir's arm over his shoulder. The proud Orion general grunted in pain, but managed to limp along as Ryan half-carried him out of the ship and towards a sheer obsidian cliff face. "There," Ymir growled, pointing with a clawed finger. "Blast that boulder." Ryan unslung his rifle and fired a tight burst at the towering rock. It shattered into gravel, revealing a reinforced blast door hidden behind it. Ymir typed a code into a concealed keypad, and the door groaned open, leading into a dimly lit tunnel. The two warriors stumbled inside, the door slamming shut behind them with a resounding clang. Motion-activated lights flickered to life, illuminating a long passageway hewn from the mountain's igneous rock. At the end stood another blast door, even thicker than the first. "A fortified command center," Ymir explained, his voice strained. "Built as a secret fail-safe bunker during our last civil war centuries ago." Ryan nodded, impressed by the foresight. They reached the inner door and Ymir input another code. With a hiss of pneumatics, it opened to reveal a large room filled with weapons racks, supply crates, a compact med bay, and a bank of humming computer servers. In the center stood a circular hollow table projecting a floating star map. Ryan helped Ymir into the med bay and lowered him onto a stainless steel exam table. He tore open the general's blood-soaked uniform and injected him with a cocktail of painkillers, antiseptics, and coagulants from the medical dispenser. As the drugs took effect, Ymir's tense muscles relaxed slightly. "My thanks, human," he rumbled. "Now to work." Ymir heaved himself off the table with a grunt and limped over to the computer terminal, his claws clacking on the polished keypad. He input his security credentials and began frantically searching through top-secret Orion databanks, using his clearance to bypass encryption and access restricted files. While Ymir worked, Ryan took up a defensive position by the entrance, his rifle aimed steadily at the blast door. He knew Corvus's forces would be scouring the moon for them, and this bunker was their only refuge. Long minutes ticked by, the silence broken only by the clatter of Ymir's claws on the keys and the faint hum of the computers. Suddenly, the Orion general let out a triumphant growl. "I have it," he called out. "Indisputable evidence of that honorless traitor's crimes." Ryan hurried over to peer at the screen. It showed intercepted transmissions, financial records, and security cam footage of clandestine meetings between Corvus and notorious pirate warlords. The files proved he had been diverting Orion military resources to secretly fund and arm the raiders for years, all while publicly condemning the pirates and vowing to eradicate them. "This is the smoking gun we need," Ryan said, hope kindling in his chest. "Quick, send it to every ship in the fleet, the Orion news nets, everyone. We'll expose that scaly bastard's treachery to the whole Empire." But Ymir hesitated, his clawed finger hovering over the transmit key. "No," he said slowly. "Corvus still has many loyal allies in the fleet who will bury the truth. Sending this data now will only tip our hand and allow him to spin it as a forgery." The general straightened up, his eyes burning with resolve. "I must confront Corvus in person before the Orion High Council, as is my right as a ranking general. I will accuse him of treason to his face and present the evidence for all to see. He will be forced to answer for his crimes." "Are you insane?" Ryan demanded. "The moment you step foot on his ship, he'll gun you down on the spot." "Then I will die with honor in service to the truth," Ymir snarled, slamming his fist on the console. "I am an Orion warrior. I do not skulk in shadows like a coward." Ryan opened his mouth to argue, but the words died on his tongue as he saw the unwavering determination in Ymir's eyes. He recognized that stubborn jut of the jaw, the rigid set of the shoulders. It was the same look he had seen in the mirror before every suicide mission. With a heavy sigh, Ryan realized he couldn't talk the proud alien out of this course. Ymir would see this through to the bitter end, even if it killed him, and Ryan would be damned if he let the general march to his death alone. "All right, you scaly bastard," he said, a wry smile tugging at his mouth. "If we're going to beard the traitor in his den, we'll need a plan." Ryan began to pace the room, his mind racing. Assaulting Corvus's flagship directly was suicide. Even with the bunker's arsenal, they couldn't fight through an entire war fleet. They needed to be smart. Subtle. Suddenly Ryan froze in his tracks, a wild idea taking shape in his head. He spun to face Ymir, a manic grin splitting his face. "I know how we're going to do this," he said, eyes gleaming. "We're not going to fight our way in, we're going to sneak in, quiet as a whisper. And we're going to hide this evidence in the one place that smug, scaly prick will never think to look, his own trophy room." Hamsh's brow ridge rose in surprise, then furrowed as he considered the outrageous plan. Slowly, a fierce grin spread across his alien features, mirroring Ryan's own. They immediately set to work gathering the necessary equipment. Ymir downloaded the incriminating files onto a micro-data chip, which Ryan carefully concealed inside a customized replica of a traditional Orion battle saber, the highest honor bestowed upon a warrior. Meanwhile, the general changed into his formal uniform, a dazzling garment of shimmering scale mail and iridescent ultra-thin composite ceramic plating. He reluctantly set aside his sidearm, knowing he would have to enter the council chambers unarmed in accordance with ancient law. For his part, Ryan donned a matte black Orion stealth suit, its reactive camouflage scales able to mimic any surface or background. He sheathed a pair of ultra-thin monomolecular combat blades in his gauntlets and slung a silenced flechette rifle across his back. The two warriors clasped forearms in a soldier's grip as they made their final preparations, the human's tanned five-fingered hand a stark contrast to the Orion's massive scaled claw. "If I fall," Ymir said solemnly, "you must take this evidence directly to the High Council. Whatever happens, Corvus must be stopped. The future of the Orion Empire depends on it." "Hey now," Ryan said, "no one's dying today. In case you haven't noticed, I'm notoriously hard to kill." With that, the unlikely duo strode up the ramp of Ryan's ship. The engines roared to life, shaking the walls of the hidden hangar. The nose of the battered freighter rose as the thrusters engaged, blasting out of the open bunker doors in a shower of pulverized moon rock. Angling the ship's nose towards the stars, Ryan punched the throttle to full burn, rocketing into space to intercept the distant glimmer of Corvus's warfleet hanging in orbit. The final confrontation was at hand. Ryan's battered freighter rocketed through the void, its hull still scorched and pitted from the harrowing escape from the volcanic moon. In the cockpit, Ryan gripped the control yoke with white knuckles, his jaw set as he guided the ship toward the looming behemoth of Corvus's warfleet. Beside him, Ymir shifted in the co-pilot's chair, his face grim. "Remember, once we're aboard, you must get that evidence to the trophy room unseen. Leave Corvus to me." Ryan nodded, keying the comm. "Attention, Orion flagship. This is Ryan Russell. I have General Ymir on board, and he wishes to surrender himself into Commander Corvus's custody." There was a crackle of static. Then Corvus's sneering voice filled the cockpit. "Well, well, the great General Ymir groveling at my feet at last. Bring him to me, human, and I may let you live." Ryan bit back a snarling retort and guided the ship into the cavernous hangar bay. The moment they touched down, a phalanx of heavily armed Orion warriors surrounded the freighter, weapons trained on the airlock. The hatch hissed open, and Ymir strode down the ramp, his head high. He allowed the guards to clamp magna cuffs around his wrists without resistance. Ryan followed, hands raised, and was immediately set upon by the soldiers. They stripped him of his rifle and obvious sidearms, then hauled him away toward the brig. As Ryan stumbled along between his captors, he counted paces and mentally reviewed the ship schematics he had memorized. The trophy room was 3 decks above, 200 meters aft of the brig. All he had to do was get out of the cell and into the ventilation ducts. The guards shoved Ryan into a bare metal cell and activated the humming force field. As soon as they disappeared around the corner, Ryan sprang into action. From hidden pockets in his boots, he produced a pair of mini stun grenades and a laser scalpel. Crouching by the cell's control panel, he carefully pried open the casing with the laser and crossed 2 wires. The force field sputtered out. Ryan then primed the stun grenades and tossed them into the corridor. 2 muffled thumps, then silence. Moving quickly, Ryan stripped off the bulky outer layer of his stealth suit, revealing the skin-tight matte black underlayer. He scooped up one of the fallen guard's key cards and sprinted to the nearest ventilation grate. A swipe of the card, and he was slithering into the cramped duct. As he shimmied through the claustrophobic passage, Ryan's thoughts turned to Ymir. The proud warrior was no doubt being paraded before Corvus at this very moment, enduring the traitor's gloating. Ryan gritted his teeth and crawled faster. On the bridge, Ymir stood tall before the command chair, his face betraying no emotion as Corvus circled him like a predator toying with cornered prey. "The charges against you are severe, Ymir," Corvus said silkily. "Consorting with humans, allowing sensitive military data to fall into their hands, defying the orders of your superiors. Why, if I didn't know better, I'd say you were a traitor to your own kind." Ymir said nothing, even as Corvus backhanded him across the face hard enough to split his scaly lip. Green blood oozed down his chin, but still he remained stoic. "I find you guilty of treason against the Orion Empire," Corvus declared, his voice ringing through the bridge. "The sentence is death, to be carried out immediately." There were shocked murmurs from some of the bridge crew, but none dared object. Corvus raised his hand, a cruel smile on his face, savouring his moment of triumph. But before he could give the execution order, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Corvus whirled to face the sensor station. "Intruder alert, sir," the officer replied, his voice tight with tension. "Someone has breached the security perimeter around your trophy room." Corvus's eyes narrowed. The trophy room, where he kept his most prized commendations and battle souvenirs, including his grandest honor saber, presented to him by the Orion High Council itself, an honor he had bought through sabotage and deceit. Realization crystallized in Corvus's mind, and he spun back to Ymir with a snarl of pure rage. The general met his gaze calmly, a hint of grim satisfaction in his eyes. He raised his fist to strike Ymir again, but suddenly the bridge was plunged into darkness as the main power grid went offline. In the red emergency lighting, Ymir surged forward, slamming his head into Corvus's face with a sickening crunch. The treacherous commander reeled back, howling in pain, dark green blood gushing from his shattered nose. Ymir pressed his advantage, driving his knee into Corvus's gut and sending him sprawling. "Guards!" Corvus screamed, his voice nasal and choked with blood. "Kill the traitor!" The bridge erupted into chaos as Corvus's loyal soldiers opened fire. Laser bolts stitched the air as Ymir dove for cover behind the navigator's console. He ripped out a handful of wires and jammed them into his Magna cuffs, shorting out the locking mechanism. The cuffs fell away and Ymir flexed his wrists, eyes darting around for a weapon. Corvus staggered to the weapons locker and wrenched it open, seizing his personal plasma rifle. He sighted down the barrel at Ymir's exposed head, finger tightening on the trigger. Suddenly the bridge doors exploded inward in a shower of sparks and smoke. A lone figure burst through the swirling haze, a snarl on his soot-streaked face and a stolen pulse rifle blazing in his hands. Ryan charged straight at Corvus, knocking the plasma rifle aside with a vicious swipe of his rifle butt. Corvus reeled, then recovered, lashing out with a booted foot that caught Ryan in the gut. The human doubled over, wheezing, but managed to tackle Corvus around the waist. The two combatants crashed through the observation windows in a hail of shattered polymers. Warnings blared as the atmosphere began venting into space, the pressure differential pulling at the struggling figures. Ryan and Corvus tumbled into the airlock antechamber, trading vicious blows. Corvus raked his claws across Ryan's face, drawing blood. Ryan retaliated with a headbutt that split the skin above Corvus's eye. On the bridge, Ymir rallied the loyal crew members and sealed the blast doors, trapping Corvus's soldiers outside. Corvus saw his men hammering futilely at the reinforced portals and let out a howl of frustrated rage. Ryan wiped his bleeding lip, a cold smile on his face. "Wasn't planning on killing you, Corvus. I want you to live. I want you to stand trial and watch your supporters scatter like roaches when that evidence hits the news nets." Corvus's eyes widened as he realized the true depth of Ryan's plan. With a scream of pure hate, he launched himself at the human, claws extended. Ryan met him head-on, locking his hands around the Orion's throat. Corvus's scales were slick with blood, both his and Ryan's. The human couldn't get a solid grip. He could feel his strength waning, his vision starting to tunnel. In desperation, he did the only thing he could. Ryan slammed his fist down on the emergency override button. The outer airlock doors exploded outward, and the vacuum of space rushed in with a deafening roar. Corvus's scream was lost in the maelstrom, as both he and Ryan were ripped out of the ship and flung into the pitiless void. Ymir could only watch in mute horror as his human ally and his treacherous foe spun out into the starry abyss, locked in a fatal embrace. The airlock doors slammed shut automatically, cutting off the vacuum. Ymir staggered to the observation window, searching desperately for any sign of the two combatants. But there was only the infinite expanse of space, cold and uncaring. Ryan and Corvus were gone, swallowed by the void. On the bridge of Corvus's warship, a heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the soft beeping of consoles and the ragged breathing of the shell-shocked crew. Ymir stood at the observation window, his massive frame rigid, staring out into the starry void where he had last seen Ryan. The human had sacrificed himself to stop Corvus, and Ymir felt the weight of that loss like a physical blow. The general's clawed hands clenched into fists at his sides, his eyes squeezing shut as he bowed his head. Ryan had been more than an ally. He had been a true friend, one of the few beings in the galaxy who had earned Ymir's respect and trust. And now, he was gone, his body lost to the cold embrace of space. But even as grief threatened to overwhelm him, Ymir forced himself to focus on the task at hand. Corvus's guards still roamed the ship, and the traitor's loyal soldiers outnumbered Ymir's supporters. He had to secure the bridge and regain control before... Suddenly the comm system crackled to life, a familiar voice filling the air. "General Ymir, this is Ryan Russell. I have Corvus in custody, and I'm demanding an immediate ceasefire." Ymir's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. He lunged for the comm panel, his voice rough with emotion. "Ryan, where are you?" "Currently docking in the hangar bay," came the response, amusement clear in Ryan's tone. "I suggest you get those guards to stand down, unless you want things to get messy." Ymir barked an order to the crew, his voice booming through the bridge. "All units, ceasefire immediately. Stand down and report to the hangar bay." He turned on his heel and strode toward the doors, his heart pounding with a mixture of relief and anticipation. Could it really be true? Was Ryan alive? The doors to the hangar bay slid open, and Ymir stepped through, his eyes immediately locking onto the battered freighter sitting in the center of the deck. And there, striding down the ramp with a cocky grin on his face, was Ryan. The human had one hand clamped firmly on Corvus's shoulder, the traitor stumbling along in a set of heavy mag cuffs. Ymir crossed the deck in a few long strides, stopping just short of the pair. His eyes raked over Ryan, taking in the scorch marks on his armor and the blood smeared across his face. But beneath the grime, those blue eyes sparkled with the same irreverent humor as always. Ryan shrugged, wincing slightly at the motion. "You should see the other guy." He gave Corvus a rough shove, sending the traitor sprawling to his knees. Reaching behind his back, Ryan drew out a battle saber, Ymir's own blade, the one that had been presented to Corvus as a false honor. With a flick of his wrist, Ryan tossed it to Ymir. "I believe this belongs to you, General," he said, his smirk widening. Ymir caught the saber, his fingers curling around the hilt. He could feel the weight of the hidden data chip inside, the evidence that would bring Corvus to justice. A slow grin spread across his face as he realized the full scope of Ryan's plan. Turning to the assembled crew, Ymir raised his voice. "Set a course for the Orion homeworld. This traitor will face trial for his crimes against the Empire." As the crew hurried to obey, Ymir turned back to Ryan. The human was leaning heavily against a support strut, his face pale beneath the blood and grime. Ymir crossed to him in 2 strides, gripping his arm in a warrior's salute. So you have proven yourself a true friend and ally, he said solemnly. I am honored to fight beside you. Ryan returned the gesture, his hand firm on Emir's forearm. Likewise, General. Now let's get this scaly bastard to justice. Together they strode off the hangar deck, Corvus stumbling along between them. As the warship jumped to hyperspeed, Emir felt a sense of grim satisfaction settle in his chest. There would be challenges ahead, but with Ryan at his side, he knew they could face anything. As Emir's warship burst out of hyperspeed into the Orion system, alarms blared across the bridge, the viewscreen filled with a phalanx of heavily armed dreadnoughts, their hulls emblazoned with Corvus's personal sigil. They had the warship completely surrounded, disruptor cannons charged and aimed directly at the ship's vulnerable engines. Incoming transmission from the lead vessel, the comms officer reported, her voice tight with tension. Emir straightened his shoulders, his face a grim mask. On screen. The view screen flickered, resolving into the sneering visage of Zektar Corvus's second-in-command. The ruthless Orion's scales were polished to a high sheen, his eyes glittering with malice. General Emir, Zektar drawled, how good of you to join us. I'm afraid I must insist you release Commander Corvus immediately. Emir's clawed fists clenched at his sides. Corvus will face justice for his crimes against the Orion people. I will not release that traitor into your custody. Zektar's face contorted in a snarl, revealing rows of jagged teeth. Corvus is no traitor. It is you who have betrayed our kind, Ymir. I have assumed control of the High Council in your absence. They have denounced you as a collaborator with the humans. Surrender now and your death will be quick. Ymir slammed his fist on the console, his voice booming across the bridge. I will never yield to a duplicitous snake like you, Zektar. Then you have sealed your fate, old fool, Zektar spat. He made a sharp gesture off-screen and suddenly the void lit up with disruptor fire. The warship shuddered under the onslaught, sparks flying from overloaded consoles. Ymir barked orders to return fire and commence evasive maneuvers, but it was clear they were outgunned and outnumbered. In the chaos, no one noticed the brig's security feed flicker and die. No one saw Corvus emerge from the smoking hole in his cell door, a stolen disruptor in his claws. The traitor crept through the dimmed corridors, rallying his supporters among the crew, turning them against Ymir with whispered lies and treacherous promises. All across the ship, fierce firefights erupted as Corvus's mutineers clashed with Ymir's loyal soldiers. Orion fought Orion in brutal close-quarters combat, the screams of the dying mingling with the shriek of rending metal. On the bridge, Ryan gripped the back of Ymir's command chair, his mind racing. They couldn't win this fight, not with an enemy within and without. Suddenly, a desperate plan crystallized in his mind. "General," he said urgently, "I have an idea, but you're not going to like it." Ymir glanced at him, his eyes narrowing. "Speak quickly, human." "Zektar is here to tie up loose ends," Ryan explained. "He needs Corvus dead to solidify his coup, so we give him what he wants. We let Corvus escape." "Have you lost your mind?" Ymir growled. "I will not allow that traitor to slip through my grasp." "He won't," Ryan assured him. "We just need to make Zektar think he has. Once Corvus is on his ship, I'll infiltrate wearing his armor. I'll plant the evidence implicating Zektar in the pirate attacks. We expose that scaly bastard's treachery to the whole damn Orion fleet." Ymir hesitated, his eyes searching Ryan's face. The human met his gaze unflinchingly, a grim determination etched in every line of his battle-scarred visage. "It's the only way," Ryan said softly. Ymir let out a low growl of frustration, but he could see no alternative. "Do it," he commanded. Ryan nodded sharply and sprinted from the bridge, snatching a pulse rifle from a fallen guard as he went. He fought his way down to the escape pod bay, using the ship's internal sensors to track Corvus's life signs. He found the traitor crouched behind a barricade of twisted deck plating, exchanging fire with a knot of Ymir's soldiers. Ryan took careful aim and squeezed the trigger, sending a burst of searing plasma into the Loyalists' midst. They scattered and fell, their smoking corpses buying Corvus the distraction he needed. The traitor leapt from cover and sprinted for the nearest escape pod, but Ryan was faster. He tackled Corvus from behind, sending them both crashing to the deck in a tangle of limbs. "What are you doing, human?" Corvus snarled, struggling against Ryan's grip. "Saving your scaly hide, you ungrateful bastard," Ryan spat. He hauled Corvus upright and shoved him towards the pod. "Get in. When you reach Zektar's ship, tell him you overpowered me and escaped." Corvus's eyes narrowed in suspicion, but the ship buckled under another barrage, the bulkheads groaning in protest. Survival won out over mistrust, and the Orion commander scrambled into the pod. Ryan sealed the hatch and slapped the launch control, sending the tiny craft shooting out into the void. He watched on the external monitors as a tractor beam lanced out from Zektar's flagship, capturing the pod and reeling it in. The human allowed himself a tight smile. The plan was in motion, but they weren't out of this mess yet. Ryan stripped off his battered stealth suit and donned Corvus's distinctive crimson battle armor, the one that had been presented to him upon his promotion to commander. He grimaced at the stench of Corvus's sweat, but there was no help for it. Sealing the helmet, Ryan activated the armor's maglock soles and sprinted to the nearest airlock. He cycled through into the void of space, the armor's force field the only thing between him and instant death. With a prayer to whatever gods might be listening, Ryan fired the armor's integrated thrusters and shot towards Zektar's flagship, a crimson comet streaking across the battle-scarred void. As he approached the looming dreadnought, he opened a channel to Ymir's warship. "General, I'm in position. Commence your attack run now." "Understood," Ymir's voice crackled over the comm. "Good hunting, Ryan. Give that treacherous filth hell." Ryan slipped through the flagship's energy shielding, the armor's IFF transponder marking him as a friendly. He maglocked to the hull and crept towards the nearest maintenance hatch, his heart pounding in his ears. The human wormed his way inside, dropping into a dimly lit service corridor. Alarms blared and crew members rushed past, too focused on repelling Ymir's attack to pay him any heed. Ryan consulted the schematics he'd downloaded into his helmet's HUD, plotting the quickest route to the bridge. He set off at a run, his borrowed armor clanking with each step. As he navigated the labyrinthine passages, Ryan's mind raced ahead, gaming out every possible scenario. They would only have one shot at this. If he failed, if Zektar saw through the ruse. Ryan shook his head sharply, banishing the thought. Failure was not an option. Ymir was counting on him. The fate of the Orion Empire hung in the balance. He reached the final blast door separating him from the bridge, his gauntleted hand hovering over the release. Through the reinforced tritanium, he could hear Zektar's gloating voice, muffled but still dripping with smug satisfaction. "Thought you could outsmart me, Corvus. You always were a fool. I have been planning this for years, decades. I am the true master of the Orion people, the one who will lead them to glory. And you are nothing but a loose end to be tied off." There was a meaty thud of flesh striking flesh, and a pained grunt that could only be Corvus. Ryan's jaw clenched. It was now or never. The human slapped the door release and burst onto the bridge, the crimson armor glinting under the harsh lighting. Zektar whirled to face him, his eyes widening in shock at the sight of a second Corvus. He charged forward, bowling over the guards who moved to block his path. His gauntleted fist slammed into the comms officer's jaw, dropping him like a sack of spare parts. Ryan leapt to the main console, his hands flying over the controls with a speed and surety born of desperation. He ripped the data chip from his armor's hidden compartment and jammed it into the mainframe's access port. "Broadcast all files, all channels," he roared. "Maximum encryption." On the view screen, the face of every Orion commander in the fleet appeared, their expressions morphing from confusion to shock to outrage as the evidence of Zektar's treachery poured across their screens. Financial records of bribes paid to pirate warlords, hollow recordings of clandestine meetings, classified military documents outlining false flag operations designed to destabilize the Orion frontier. And at the center of it all, Zektar's sneering face, gloating over the chaos he had orchestrated, the lives he had sacrificed for his own ambition. "No!" Zektar howled, lunging for the console. "Kill the broadcast! Shut it down!" But it was too late. The truth was out, spreading like wildfire across the Orion battle net. On the view screen, Orion commanders began barking orders to their crew, their ships peeling away from the formation to turn their guns on Zektar's flagship. "Oh," the traitor finally managed, his voice quivering with rage. "You filthy meddling human, I'll kill you." Zektar snatched a disruptor pistol from his belt and leveled it at Ryan's head, murder in his eyes. But before he could pull the trigger, a snarling blur of crimson scales slammed into him from the side. Corvus, bloody and battered but still very much alive, grappled with his former ally, the two Orions rolling across the deck in a tangle of claws and gnashing teeth. Ryan didn't hesitate. He sprinted for the airlock, alarms blaring in his wake. He could hear Zektar's enraged screams, the meaty thud of armored fists striking scaled flesh. He reached the airlock and punched the emergency release, diving through the hatch into the void beyond. His armor's force field snapped into place just as the outer doors slammed shut behind him. Ryan tumbled through the void, watching in breathless awe as Ymir's warship unleashed a devastating broadside on Zektar's flagship. The dreadnought's shields flared and died under the onslaught, explosions blossoming across its hull like obscene flowers. A lance of pure energy slammed into the bridge viewport, vaporizing tritanium and flesh alike in a blinding flash. Ryan squeezed his eyes shut against the glare, feeling the heat wash over him even through the armor's shielding. When he opened them again, Zektar's flagship was a gutted ruin, flames billowing from every airlock. And the bridge was nothing but a gaping hole, the edges still glowing with the heat of Ymir's vengeance. Zektar was gone. Corvus too, most likely. Vaporized in the hellish inferno, their ashes scattered across the stars. It was over. It was finally over. Ryan let out a shuddering breath, his whole body sagging with exhaustion and relief. He triggered the armor's emergency beacon and watched as Ymir's warship swept towards him, the hangar bay doors yawning open like the jaws of salvation. As the tractor beam caught him and began reeling him in, Ryan allowed himself a small, tired smile. He had done it. Against all odds, he and Ymir had exposed the traitors and saved the Orion Empire from itself. Now he just wanted a hot shower and a stiff drink, and maybe, just maybe, a well-earned rest. Ryan's battered escape pod drifted through the void, its hull scorched and pockmarked from the intense battle. Inside, Ryan slumped in the harness, his body aching from the brutal fight with Corvus and the harrowing flight through the explosions engulfing Zektar's bridge. Suddenly, the pod shuddered as a tractor beam locked on, the invisible force field enveloping the small craft. Ryan's head snapped up, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon, but as he peered through the viewport, his tension eased. Ymir's warship loomed before him, its hull scarred but triumphant. The tractor beam drew Ryan's pod into the cavernous hangar bay, setting it down with a gentle thump. The pod's hatch hissed open, and Ryan stepped out, blinking in the bright light. And then the hangar erupted with deafening cheers. Hundreds of Orion crew members crowded the space, their fists raised in the air as they roared Ryan's name. They surged forward, clapping him on the back, grasping his hand, their faces alight with gratitude and respect. "Well done, human. You saved us all." Ryan grinned, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. He had fought beside these Orions, bled with them, but he had never expected such a welcome. And then the crowd parted, and Ymir strode forward, his massive frame dwarfing those around him. The general's face was etched with weariness, but his eyes shone with pride. He reached Ryan and, in a rare display of emotion, pulled the human into a crushing embrace. Ryan stiffened in surprise, then returned the hug fiercely. "You have my deepest thanks," Ymir rumbled as he stepped back, his clawed hands gripping Ryan's shoulders. "Your courage and cunning exposed the true traitors. Without you, Corvus and Zektar would have plunged the Empire into chaos." Ryan shook his head. We did this together, General. I couldn't have done it without you and your loyal crew. Ymir nodded, then turned to face the assembled Orions. Zektar and Corvus are dead, he announced, his voice booming through the hangar. Their treachery has been laid bare for all to see. On cue, the view screens flickered to life, displaying the evidence Ryan had broadcast from Zektar's ship. The Orions watched, their faces hardening with anger as they saw the depths of the traitor's deceit. The crew erupted in cheers, their roars echoing off the bulkheads. Ymir raised a hand for silence. I have just received word from the Orion High Council, he said, his voice filled with a quiet pride. They have been freed from Zektar's control, and they have reinstated me as Supreme Commander of the Orion Fleet. Another round of cheers, even louder than before. Ymir let it wash over him for a moment, then turned to Ryan. None of this would have been possible without you, my friend, he said solemnly. You have proven yourself a true Orion warrior, in spirit, if not in blood. Ymir unsheathed his battle saber and held it aloft. Kneel, Ryan Russell. As Ryan stood, the crew burst into applause, their approval thunderous in the enclosed space. Ymir raised a hand for quiet once more. I would be honored to have you at my side, the general said to Ryan, as my trusted advisor and friend. Together we could usher in a new era of peace and prosperity for the Orion Empire. Ryan swallowed hard, deeply moved. For a moment he was tempted. To have a place to belong, a cause to fight for, it was all he had ever wanted. But deep in his heart he knew his path lay elsewhere. I am honored beyond words, Ryan said thickly, but I cannot accept. My place is out there, among the stars, fighting for those who cannot fight for themselves. Ymir's face fell for a moment, but then he nodded slowly. I understand. You have a warrior's spirit, Ryan. It cannot be tamed or bound. The general turned and gestured to the hangar entrance. But you will not go empty-handed. Come, I have a gift for you. Curious, Ryan followed Ymir through the blast doors and into the main hangar. And there, sitting in the center of the cavernous space, was a ship unlike any Ryan had ever seen. It was an Orion warship, its sleek lines and deadly curves marking it as a predator among the stars. But it was smaller than a standard cruiser, built for speed and stealth. Its hull gleamed with a matte black finish that seemed to swallow the light. This is the Defiant, Ymir said, pride evident in his voice. Fresh from the shipyards of our homeworld, outfitted with the very latest in Orion technology and weaponry. The general turned to Ryan, his eyes glinting. And she is yours, my friend, a small token of our gratitude for your service. Ryan gaped at the ship, stunned beyond words. He had flown many vessels in his career, but none had ever felt so right, as if the Defiant had been built just for him. Say that you will use her well, Ymir replied, clasping Ryan's shoulder. That you will continue your fight for justice, wherever it may take you. Ryan met Ymir's gaze, his jaw tightening with resolve. I will, I swear it. The general nodded, satisfied. Then go with my blessing, and know that you will always have an ally in the Orion Empire. Ryan strode up the Defiant's ramp, his boots ringing on the metal. He paused at the top and turned. Ymir stood at the bottom, his crew arrayed behind him. As one, they snapped to attention and saluted, the gesture of respect from a warrior race to one of their own. Ryan swallowed past the sudden lump in his throat and returned the salute, his arm knife straight. Then he turned and disappeared into his new ship. On the bridge, Ryan slid into the command chair, his hands caressing the controls. The console glowed to life, the view screen shimmering with stars. Nix, plot a course for the outer rim, Ryan said, his voice steady. We have work to do. The AI chirped an acknowledgement, and the Defiant leaped forward, the stars blurring into streaks of light as she hurtled into the void. On the bridge of his warship, Ymir watched the Defiant disappear, a faint smile on his craggy face. The galaxy was a brighter place with Ryan out there, a shining beacon of hope for the oppressed and innocent. The Defiant streaked away, the promise of new adventures and challenges awaiting her intrepid captain. The Defiant streaked through the uncharted void, its matte black hull blending seamlessly with the endless expanse of space. On the bridge, Ryan reclined in the command chair, his boots propped up on the console as he idly flicked through sensor readings on the holo display. Suddenly, a shrill alarm pierced the quiet hum of the engines. Ryan jerked upright, his eyes widening as he saw the flashing red alert splashed across the screen, a distress signal emanating from a nearby sector. "Nix, isolate that signal and put it through," Ryan barked, his fingers flying over the controls. The AI complied, and a burst of static filled the bridge, resolving into a hauntingly familiar voice. "This is General Emir of the Orion Empire. We are under attack by an unknown alien force. Shields failing, weapons offline. Requesting immediate assistance from any allied ships in range. Repeat, this is—" The message cut off abruptly, replaced by an ominous silence. Ryan's heart hammered in his chest as he pulled up the long-range scanners. There, limping on the edge of sensor range, was the distinct signature of Emir's personal cruiser, the Raptor's Claw. And looming over it like a monstrous predator was a gargantuan alien vessel, easily dwarfing any ship Ryan had ever encountered. "Nick, set an intercept course, maximum burn," Ryan snapped, his fingers already dancing across the weapons control panel, priming the Defiant's cutting-edge arsenal. "Divert all power to engines and forward shields." The Defiant surged forward, the stars blurring into streaks of light as the warp drive engaged. Ryan gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles white, as the ship hurtled through the void toward the besieged Orion cruiser. They dropped out of warp with a shudder, the alien dreadnought filling the view screen. It was a nightmarish construct of jagged black metal and pulsing green lines, bristling with wicked-looking spikes and thrumming with malevolent energy. And it was pounding Emir's crippled ship with a relentless barrage of sizzling emerald beams. "This is Captain Ryan Russell of the Defiant, calling unknown alien vessel," Ryan broadcast on all frequencies, his voice cold as steel. "You are attacking an Orion Empire ship. Stand down immediately or face the consequences." There was a moment of tense silence. Then a response crackled across the comm, a guttural snarl of consonants and hisses that set Ryan's teeth on edge. He couldn't understand the words, but the menacing tone spoke volumes. Lances of searing blue energy slammed into the alien dreadnought's shields, sending ripples of crackling disruption across the shimmering barrier. Ryan targeted the weak points with ruthless precision, each salvo carefully aimed to overload and collapse the energy screen. But the alien ship barely seemed to notice the onslaught. Its shields held firm, absorbing the punishment without so much as a flicker. And then, with a chilling hum of power, it swung its massive bulk around to face the Defiant head-on. A storm of plasma torpedoes erupted from its forward batteries, a wall of roiling destruction hurtling toward the comparatively tiny Orion ship. Ryan wrenched the controls hard to port, sending the Defiant into a spiraling, evasive pattern. But even with the ship's advanced inertial dampeners, the violent maneuvers slammed Ryan back into his seat with crushing force. Alarms shrieked as the near misses scorched the Defiant's hull, the shields straining to repel the brutal assault. On the view screen, Ryan watched in horror as a tractor beam lanced out from the dreadnought, ensnaring the Raptor's Claw like a fly in a web. The Orion ship shuddered and lurched, its engines flaring uselessly as it was dragged toward a cavernous opening in the alien vessel's flank. Ryan's mind raced, desperately searching for a solution. The Defiant was fast and agile, but it couldn't hope to match the dreadnought's raw firepower. A head-on fight would be suicide. But there was one thing he could do, one desperate, reckless gambit that might just give them a fighting chance. "Nix, arm the torpedo bays," Ryan ordered, his voice grim. "Target that tractor beam emitter. Simultaneous impact, maximum yield." The AI bleeped an acknowledgement, and Ryan felt the deck shudder beneath his feet as the launch tubes loaded. He watched the targeting reticle drift across the view screen, locking onto the pulsing green node at the base of the tractor beam. A dozen stars streaked from the Defiant's keel, corkscrewing through the void with trails of shimmering plasma. They slammed into the tractor beam emitter in a blinding flash of light, the concentrated antimatter warheads tearing through shields and armor like tissue paper. The node exploded in a maelstrom of green fire and twisting metal. The tractor beam flickered and died, the raptor's claw lurching free of its grasp. But the dreadnought was already turning, its weapons swiveling to target the impudent attacker. Ryan didn't give it the chance. With a feral grin, he slammed the thrusters to full and aimed the Defiant straight at the gaping maw of the alien hangar bay. The smaller ship shot forward, weaving through a hail of point defense fire, its own guns blazing in response. The Defiant screamed into the cavernous hangar, explosions blooming in its wake, as its weapons scythed through rank after rank of alien small craft. Ryan could see the dreadnought's crew scrambling for cover, caught off guard by the audacious assault. He jinked and rolled, avoiding the streams of return fire that stitched the air around him. The hangar was a chaotic maelstrom of smoke, fire, and shrapnel, but Ryan's eyes were fixed on his target. There at the far end of the bay, glowing with an eerie green light, was the ship's main reactor. Ryan bared his teeth in a savage smile and wrung every last ounce of speed from the Defiant's straining engines. "All hands brace for impact," he roared over the ship-wide comm. "This is going to get bumpy." The Defiant hurtled toward the reactor, its hull glowing cherry red from the friction. Ryan could feel the heat searing his face, even through the bridge's reinforced viewports. At the last possible second, he fired the ventral thrusters, flipping the ship on its axis. The Defiant slammed into the reactor core with a thunderous boom. Ryan felt his teeth rattle in his skull as the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the bone-shattering impact. The ship plowed through the containment field in a spray of molten metal and crackling energy, burying itself deep in the dreadnought's vital systems. Alerts screamed and sparks fountained from ruptured conduits as the Defiant's hull buckled and tore. But the reactor was already going critical, a runaway chain reaction building with terrifying speed. "Nix, lock onto Ymir's life signs and any other survivors," Ryan shouted over the cacophony of alarms. "Emergency beam out now." The AI complied, and Ryan felt the tingling static of the transporter beam engulf him. The bridge of the Defiant dissolved into shimmering motes of light, replaced an instant later by the familiar contours of the transport room. Ryan sprinted for the door, his heart pounding. He burst onto the bridge just as the helmsman slammed the warp throttle to full. The Defiant leapt forward, the stars smearing into lines of light as it raced to escape the cataclysm building behind it. On the view screen, the alien dreadnought receded, cracks of white-hot fire spreading across its hull like a spiderweb of doom. And then, with a blinding flash, it detonated. Gay titanic fireball blossomed in the void, a miniature supernova that seared Ryan's retinas, even through the auto-polarizing screen. The shockwave slammed into the Defiant, like the fist of an angry god, sending it tumbling end over end. Ryan clung to the arms of his chair, gritting his teeth as the ship shuddered and groaned around him. But gradually, the turbulence subsided, the warp field stabilizing as they outran the worst of the blast. "Hull breaches on decks 4 through 9, Nix reported, her calm voice at odds with the chaos. "Shields down to 12%. Warp drive holding steady. All survivors from the Raptor's claw accounted for in the medical bay." Ryan let out a shuddering breath, his adrenaline-fueled strength draining away like water. He hauled himself out of his chair, his legs wobbling beneath him, and staggered toward the turbolift. The scene in the medical bay was one of controlled chaos. Orion crew members lay on every available surface, their green scales mottled with burns and gashes. The Defiant's medical team moved among them, triaging the worst of the wounded with brisk efficiency. And there, on a surgical bed in the center of the room, lay Ymir. The general's once proud form was battered and broken, his chest a ruined mass of charred flesh and shattered bone. His breath came in ragged gasps, each one a clear struggle. Ryan rushed to his side, his throat tight with emotion. He gripped Ymir's hand, feeling the weak flutter of the Orion's pulse beneath his fingers. "Ymir," he said, his voice cracking, "stay with me, old friend. We'll get you patched up, good as new." But even as he spoke the words, Ryan knew it was a lie. The general's injuries were too severe, the damage too extensive. Ymir's eyes flickered open, fixing on Ryan's face with a startling clarity. "Ryan," he rasped, his voice a ghost of its former power. "The Vox! They have returned." "An ancient enemy," Ymir said, each word an effort. "Vanished millennia ago, thought extinct, but they are back, and they seek to conquer." The general's hand tightened on Ryan's with surprising strength, his eyes burning with urgent intensity. "You must warn the Orion Empire. The Vox technology far surpasses our own. Our fleet cannot stand against them alone." Ymir's breath hitched, a bubble of blood forming at the corner of his mouth. Ryan leaned closer, straining to catch the general's fading words. "Unite the races of the galaxy, Ryan," Ymir whispered. "Only together can we hope to resist the Vox onslaught. You must lead them. Promise me." A faint smile touched Ymir's lips. "I know you will, my friend. The fate of the galaxy is in your hands now." With a final shuddering breath, the light faded from Ymir's eyes. His hand went slack in Ryan's grip, the indomitable spirit that had driven him in life fleeing his broken body at last. Ryan bowed his head, grief and rage warring in his heart. Ymir had been more than a comrade, more than a friend. He had been a mentor, a guiding light in the darkness of a hostile universe. And now he was gone, snuffed out by an enemy that threatened everything they had fought to protect, an enemy that would pay dearly for what they had done. Ryan rose to his feet, his jaw set with grim determination. He strode out of the medical bay, his steps ringing with purpose on the metal deck plates. He reached the bridge and slid into the command chair, his fingers already flying over the controls. The Defiant's engines thrummed with power, the stars outside the viewports blurring into streaks of light as the ship leapt into warp. "Nix, set a course for the Orion homeworld," Ryan said, his voice cold as the void. "We have a lot of work to do." The AI chirped an acknowledgement, and the Defiant surged forward, racing toward the heart of the Orion Empire with news that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy. On the view screen, the stars rushed by in an endless cascade, each one a glittering promise of the battles to come. Ryan stared into their depths, his eyes hard with resolve. The Vox had started this war, but he would be the one to finish it. No matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, he would see the galaxy freed from their looming shadow. For Ymir, for the Orions, for every sentient being that called the stars their home, you have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.